here again with more of my Swiss mischief. And this one is called, it's actually number, if you count matric mischief and then stripping and swearing, this has to be the third one, and it's called Smoking and Movie Stars. And it starts like this. A month passed very pleasantly as I became more and more fluent in French. I sat and watched Jean-Claude Killy's triple gold medal triumph at Grenoble's Winter Olympics in France. Since Killy's feat, no alpine ski racer has ever won 3 gold medals in a single Olympic Games. Monsieur Anseau and I cheered him on after we sat and watched Petit Lapin, the children's program hosted by a cheeky rabbit, which aired just before the evening news and weather forecast. Monsieur Anseau had retired after a hard and busy life as the only vet in the village, and was happy to sit every afternoon as soon as it got dark and watch whatever the Swiss television offered on their solitary French language channel. The other 2 channels were separately reserved for the other 2 official Swiss languages, German and Italian. Occasionally, he'd spend a morning or afternoon skiing, sometimes with us or with a couple of his old mates from the village. It certainly was the best possible way I could have absorbed French, and very soon I was laughing with him when Monsieur guffawed at Petit Lapin's antics. The other 2 girls, already accustomed to TV, sat in their room and smoked, or Jonty went out with the heartbreaking, gorgeous Louis Ami, who'd been pacing up and down the Anseau's front path every evening, waiting for us to catch the last téléphérique back down from the slopes as it got dark. He'd whisk Jonty away after supper every evening, and invariably Britta went with them. I wasn't invited, nor would I have felt confident enough to go along with them. Louis and me only had eyes for Jonty, and Britta was used to going out to bars and cafes. I'd never done any such thing. I'd left the cocoon of our isolated and remote ranch, and then the strict confines of an all-girl boarding school, and had no idea of how to cope in real teenage social life. Madame, bless her, understood perfectly, and had been primed by Dad anyway, about how green I was. She made sure I didn't feel left out, though. Told me that I wasn't missing much, and when her son Pierre came home for the weekend, he'd take me out with the group and look after me. I was happy enough, thanks to her clever way of handling me, and became really very fond of the 2 of them, as we all sat companionably in the snug TV room after supper. Right up until my 18th birthday, at the end of January, every day, straight after an early breakfast, we 3 girls set off for the ski slopes to attend ski school all morning before having a small appetizer called Äpfelsaft and a light lunch of half a baguette filled with garlic saucisson, Gruyere cheese, and a sliced pickled gherkin in the restaurant at the top of the mountain. For the rest of the afternoon, we'd practice what we'd learned before skiing down to the bottom cable station to catch the last telephorique. My skiing improved rapidly. I was slim and fit and had a good sense of balance after having ridden horses all my life. I was athletic and fearless too, all of which helped me quickly become good at the sport. My feet never thawed out though. They remained blue and frozen until I could ease them into a warm bath at the end of the day back at my suite at the chalet. My feet became deformed with calluses and were oddly misshapen from the too small ski boots. But I seemed to be dodging actual frostbite, so that was okay. A wonderful way to spend the day, and we got a warm welcome from Madame every evening as we arrived, cheeks glowing rosy red from the cold fresh air, and ravenous for a hot supper made by Therese, which we all ate together in their breakfast nook. My appetite improved, but I was still a picky eater to Madame's amusement. She hadn't come across this before, as the other two were really hungry when they sat down, and she didn't allow them seconds. Madame knew exactly how to handle me. She coaxed me to eat my peas in such an irresistible way that I couldn't refuse. And it was the other girls who were reprimanded for being greedy, as both were inclined to put on weight and had to be careful. There was another bonus to my general health and dust mite allergies. There were no dust mites in the chalet, and thus my hay fever, which had plagued me constantly both at school and home for all those years, disappeared overnight. I was eating well, getting plenty of fresh air and exercise, and had no stress whatsoever. I thrived and couldn't have been happier. Madame made a delightfully big fuss of my birthday and had Therese bake a beautifully iced cake with 18 candles on it for me. She and Monsieur presented me with a beautiful pair of little ornamental silver pheasants. Sadly, I've lost them in the many moves that I've made to and from various countries. The girls gave me a pair of thick woolen socks, which I could only wear in the chalet or with my sealskin boots. But sadly, not where I most needed them, on the slopes. I soon found out that they'd shoplifted the gift to come. Pierre was coming home for the weekend, and there was a flurry of excitement. He arrived on the Friday night and immediately went out with Britta, Jonty, and Louis and me. I didn't realize that Britta and Pierre were an item. They'd fallen in love on his first visit up there, the weekend before I'd arrived. Pierre was tall and dark-haired like his mother, not particularly good-looking, but with a larger-than-life character. He had a wicked sense of humour and kept us entertained and crying with laughter at his mimicry, stories about his job in a town on Lake Geneva, 2 hours' drive away, and the affectionate way he teased his parents. He'd skied before he could walk, as had the other members of the Anchot family, was superb at the sport, and every bit as good as the instructors, as was the unrequited love of my life, Louis and me. The chalet was always thick with cigarette smoke, as everybody except me smoked. Both the senior Anchots chain smoked, and the others puffed away with gusto. Even old Therese kept a packet of Gauloise in her apron pocket and lit up frequently. This was long before smoking, and indeed passive smoking, had become an issue. Everybody smoked, all the Swiss, from the lift operators to the instructors to the people in the shops and streets, all smoked like chimneys. I suppose I was slowly becoming kippered in that atmosphere, but it wasn't all the time, since I spent most of the time in my smoke-free room, bathing, reading or sleeping, and out of doors during the day. I was only really subjected to the blue smoke haze downstairs and in the little TV room in the evenings when we all socialized. It was such a relief to me to be rid of that awful, constant sneezing, itchy eyes and streaming raw nose from which I'd suffered with my hay fever and other allergies for the best part of my life, that I didn't mind the smoke at all. This wasn't good enough for the other girls, though. After Pierre left on Sunday night after my birthday, they invited me up to their room on the top floor. I was pleased and surprised, as this was a first. "You've got to learn to smoke like the rest of us," said Jonty, firmly. Britta agreed, emphasizing to me how much I was missing out and how cool and trendy it was to smoke. It would make me more attractive to the ski instructors too, if I could ask them for a light. It was a perfectly legitimate way to approach these distant and most desirable men, and possibly the gateway to getting invited out on a date with one of them. That was enough for me. Jonty gave me a filter-tipped cigarette and Britta lit it for me. I pulled on it as hard as I'd seen regular smokers do and inhaled a massive double lungful of smoke. People's eyes widened. They knew I was completely new to this. "She swallowed all that smoke," said Britta in awe, just as the smoke impacted on my virginal lung linings, and I coughed and gasped for a full minute, reeling around, clutching at my chest, eyes pouring with tears, and completely breathless. "You have to persevere," said Jonty sternly as she handed me the cigarette back. I was more circumspect this time and drew in a mouthful of smoke, blowing it out without inhaling, trying to look cool. That was it. I felt nauseous and really hated the sting of the smoke in my mouth and nostrils, as well as the stink. But to fit in and perhaps ultimately bag myself a ski instructor, I felt it was worth it. I'd become a smoker. I moved up to the intermediate ski class after having passed the exam for the bronze medal issued by l'École de Suisse Ski School, and which I wore pinned proudly to the lapel of my anorak. Now I was going for the silver medal. After about 3 months later, I came home one evening on my own, as oddly there was no sign of the other two. I was met at the door by a flustered madame. Jonty had fallen and broken her leg quite badly that afternoon, and Madame asked if she could move her into my room with me for a while as it had an ensuite bathroom and loo. I was perfectly happy to have Jonty in with me and Britta and I ran errands for her to help Madame out, taking her meals up to her, running into the village to buy her cigarettes and other essentials, as well as helping her to the loo. It gave me a good opportunity to bond with them both, and we became really good friends. Britta now spent all her spare time in my room too. So we three sat and smoked and gossiped about boyfriends in their case, and of course ski instructors. I still had nobody. I had a huge crush, mostly on Louis and me, also on Roger Lenoir, and had now met and fallen for Roger Leblanc, the more senior instructor who taught those of us who were preparing to achieve our silver medals. Now it was Britta and me who went up the mountain together in the various stages to the top, smoking and chatting to join the cluster of intermediate skiers in front of Roger Leblanc. He was good looking in a blonde teddy boy way, if you remember them, which was the height of attraction then. He was distant, but more amenable than the dismissive Roger Lenoir, and an excellent teacher, as were they all. Now we were hurling ourselves down the red pistes, those second difficult ones, and often the black ones as well, the most difficult ones. Rita and I had discovered that if we skipped lunch, we could use that money from our daily allowance, handed to us from our parents' funds, to buy a large tankard of glühwein, the pleasant, slightly spiced, warm mulled wine they served up at this restaurant. On our empty stomachs, the drink went straight to our unaccustomed heads, and we then took off home down the most precipitous black piste, which was the shortest route we knew of to get to the teleferique ski lift before it shut down for the night. It was semi-dark by then, and we both hurtled drunkenly down these challenging runs at top speed, invincible, and as carefree as two slightly wasted birds. If we missed the lift, we'd have to ski all the way to the bottom of the mountain, off-piste, and then trudge, carrying our skis over our shoulders, a long way through the thigh-deep snow, cross the river on a narrow, swaying bridge, which terrified Britta so badly she had to sit down and shuffle along the icy planks on her bum, while I walked behind her, encouraging her and carrying her skis as well. It would then be pitch dark, and we'd still have to slog all the way up the hill, still in almost waist-deep snow, to the village, to be met by the wrath of Madame, who had, quite rightly, very strict rules about our coming straight home, as she was responsible for us. I knew all this because we missed the last lift several times, and it certainly spurred us on to ski far faster than we were really capable of in the woozy condition we were. That is all for the time being, and there's more to come next week. I would like to thank John Moslane for putting aside his Friday afternoons to help me produce these videos. Without him, I could not do this. I would also like to thank Sean van Vuren for his sterling work in uploading my videos to my YouTube channel, adding the photos, as well as managing my channel so professionally. If you would like to know more about my other works, I have written 5 books in all, and each one is autobiographical. Please visit my website at www.whitezulubook.com, where you will find a lot more information as well as plenty of photographs. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my life story, and there is plenty more to come. A thumbnail photo will be attached each week, and thank you so much for all your support and all the very kind remarks you make in complimenting me on my work. I really appreciate it.